In a town where gossip travels faster than the wind, two self-proclaimed HOA inspectors pull up to a modest brick home ready to humiliate a black woman they believe is just another rule breaker. But what they don't know will stop them cold, and today they're about to learn the cost of judging the wrong person. Kindly comment where you are listening from. We would like to know. In the small southern town of Brookhaven, where the air smelled faintly of pine and fried catfish, folks minded each other's business as much as they minded their own. The lawns were neatly trimmed, the mailboxes freshly painted, and every neighbor knew who drove what car. It was the kind of place where gossip traveled faster than wind, and the homeowners association acted like its own government. Loretta Johnson lived at the edge of Magnolia Ridge, a tidy neighborhood of identical brick houses and picket fences. She'd bought her home just 2 years earlier, a quiet retreat after 15 years in law enforcement. Most of her neighbors didn't know her well. They saw a middle-aged black woman who kept to herself, drove a silver Ford SUV, and walked her dog every morning before sunrise. They didn't know she was the county sheriff. It was a humid Saturday afternoon when the trouble started. The cicada screamed from the trees, and Loretta was out front watering her rose bushes, wearing her old denim overalls and a straw hat that shadowed her eyes. A white pickup truck rolled down the street, 2 men inside wearing neon vests with HOA inspection team printed across their chests. Loretta squinted. She hadn't heard anything about inspections that week. The truck stopped right in front of her house. The driver, a tall man with slick-back hair and mirrored sunglasses, stepped out holding a clipboard. His partner, a shorter, heavier man with a camera around his neck, followed. "Afternoon, ma'am. We're here on behalf of the Magnolia Ridge HOA. We got a few code violations to review." Loretta turned off the hose. "Code violations? For what?" He flipped a few pages. Let's see here. Your mailbox paint's chipped, your grass exceeds the length limit, and there's, right here, unapproved lawn decorations." Loretta frowned. "You mean my wind chime?" He gave a fake chuckle. "That's the one. Now, we'll need you to remove it. It doesn't meet the aesthetic standards for the neighborhood."
Loretta looked at him evenly. "That chime's been there for 2 years. No one said a thing until now." The shorter man raised his camera and snapped a photo. "Just following orders, ma'am." Loretta crossed her arms. "Whose orders?" The tall one smirked. "Mr. Michael Hayes, HOA president. He sent us to handle violations personally. We're authorized to issue fines or contact law enforcement if residents don't comply." Something sharp flickered behind Loretta's calm eyes. "Is that right?" she said softly. The shorter man leaned toward her porch. "Looks like you got an unregistered security camera up there too," he said, pointing. "That's another violation." Loretta's patience was thinning. "That camera's there for my safety. You'd know why if you understood the kind of work I do." The tall man raised a brow. "And what kind of work is that?" Loretta just smiled. "Let's say I deal with people who don't always follow the rules." The tall one chuckled, thinking she was bluffing. "Well, I deal with those too, lady. Don't make this harder than it has to be." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a slip of paper, a fine notice already pre-written. "Sign here acknowledging your violation." Loretta took a step forward, her voice steady but cold. "You boys sure you're with the HOA?" The shorter one puffed up. "Of course we are. What's that supposed to mean?" "Because," Loretta said, tilting her head, "you're trespassing on private property without proper ID, and last I checked, real inspectors don't threaten residents." The tall one's tone turned sharp. "Listen, lady, don't start something you can't finish. You're not special. These are the rules for everyone." He took a step closer, towering over her. "Now sign the paper before I call for backup." Loretta's eyes narrowed. She looked at his trembling hands and the sweat glistening on his forehead. "Backup?" she repeated. "Yeah,"
he said. Law enforcement. You don't want to find out how serious this can get. Loretta took a deep breath and smiled faintly. You're right about that. She turned, walked calmly into the house, and disappeared inside. The two men exchanged looks, the shorter one muttering, "Think she's going to get her husband or something? She better hurry up. We don't have all day."
But Loretta wasn't gone long. Less than a minute later, she stepped back onto the porch. Her overalls the same, but now her sheriff's badge gleamed on her chest. A gun rested holstered at her hip, and her tone was no longer polite. "Gentlemen," she said, voice commanding, "let's start over. You're standing on Sheriff Loretta Johnson's property. I'm the elected law enforcement officer for this county. Now, state your full names." The men froze. The tall one's sunglasses slipped down his nose, revealing eyes wide with panic. Michael," he stammered. "Michael Hayes." Loretta's eyebrow lifted. "HOA President Michael Hayes?" He nodded weakly. "Well, that's interesting," she said, stepping closer. "Because I just came from a county meeting yesterday, and the HOA president from Magnolia Ridge is Mr. James Connolly. So tell me, who exactly are you pretending to be?" The shorter man's face turned red. "This is all a misunderstanding," he mumbled. Loretta pointed to the truck. "License plate belongs to a company registered under your name, Michael. Care to explain why you're impersonating an official organization and intimidating residents?" Michael swallowed hard. "It's not like that, Sheriff. We were just trying to make sure everyone keeps the neighborhood looking right. You know how people get. We didn't mean no harm." Loretta's voice dropped to a low growl. "No harm? You threatened to call for backup. You tried to find me. That's not a misunderstanding. That's harassment and impersonation." The shorter man started sweating. "Please, Sheriff, we didn't know it was you." "That's the problem," she said quietly. "You shouldn't treat anyone differently based on who you think they are." Michael's voice shook. "We're sorry. We were just trying to keep the place decent. You know how the homeowners complain." Loretta stared at them for a long moment, then reached for her radio. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Johnson. I have 2 males impersonating HOA inspectors at Magnolia Ridge. Send units for verification and detainment."
The men's faces drained of color. The shorter one whispered, "Oh, God, she's serious." Minutes later, the wail of sirens echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Real deputies pulled up, stepping out of their cruisers. Neighbors peeked through blinds and doors as the 2 men were handcuffed on Loretta's driveway. Ms. Thompson, from across the street, an elderly lady with a pink housecoat, called out, "Loretta, what on earth happened?" Loretta just gave her a small smile. "Just cleaning up the neighborhood, ma'am." The crowd grew as word spread. Some whispered about the men being scammers. Others muttered about how people these days don't respect authority. But no one could look Loretta in the eye quite the same way again. Later that evening, as the last patrol car rolled away and the sun dipped low behind the magnolia trees, Loretta sat on her porch swing. Her dog, Buddy, rested his head on her lap. The wind chime tinkled softly in the warm breeze. Across the street, James Connolly, the real HOA president, walked over, holding his hat in his hands. "Sheriff," he said softly, "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I had no idea those fellas were going around doing this." Loretta nodded. "It's all right, James, but maybe next time we should make sure everyone knows who's actually representing the HOA." James sighed. "You're right. Folks around here have been too quick to judge lately. Guess it's easy to forget who our neighbors really are." Loretta smiled gently. "That's what fear does, James. Makes people see enemies instead of neighbors." He nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "You taught us a lesson today, Sheriff, when this town needed." Loretta looked out over the street, peaceful now, golden light fading on the lawns. "I hope so," she said quietly,
Because the uniform doesn't make me worthy of respect. My humanity does, same as anyone else's." James nodded slowly and walked back to his house, leaving Loretta in the hush of twilight. Later that evening, she sat by her kitchen window, sipping tea. Her phone buzzed, a message from one of her deputies. "You handled that with grace, boss. Proud to serve with you." She smiled. Then she looked at the wind chime swaying outside, its notes light and free. For a moment, she thought of how easily things could have gone wrong, how close the world always seemed to the edge of misunderstanding. The next morning, she woke early and took Buddy for a walk down the same street where it had all happened. People who once gave her cautious smiles now greeted her warmly. Some waved from porches. One man called out, "Morning, Sheriff." Loretta nodded, tipping her hat. "Morning, neighbor." For the first time in months, she felt the quiet peace she'd been searching for when she moved there. Not because everyone suddenly saw her rank, but because they'd finally seen her. Still, she knew deep down that not everyone learns that easily. There'd always be those who judged before they listened, who saw color before character. But maybe, just maybe, a small town like Brookhaven could change. One act of truth at a time. And in her heart, she carried the lesson from that day. Respect isn't about power or position. It's about empathy. It's about remembering that every person you meet carries a story you can't see. Weeks later, the county paper ran a headline, "Sheriff Foils HOA Scam Sparks Community Reflection." The article painted her as a hero, but Loretta didn't feel like one. Heroes save others. She just wanted to remind people to save themselves.
Months passed. The seasons turned. Loretta's roses bloomed brighter than ever. Kids rode their bikes down the sidewalks, and neighbors gathered on weekends for cookouts again. The air felt lighter. The silence between people began to fade. And sometimes, when someone new moved into the neighborhood, the old-timers would tell the story about the day two fake inspectors tried to arrest a quiet woman, not knowing she was the county sheriff. They'd laugh, shake their heads, and end the tale the same way every time. "Don't mess with Miss Loretta." But more than that, "Don't mess with what you don't understand." Loretta would hear them from her porch, smiling softly to herself. She didn't need recognition. She'd already won what mattered most, the respect of hearts that had once been blind. And though she'd never admit it aloud, she was grateful that those men had come to her door that day, because without that chaos, this town might never have seen the truth about itself. By nightfall, the wind would rise again, setting her old wind chimes singing across the yard, soft, sweet, and steady. And as its notes drifted through the warm southern air, they carried with them a message too quiet for words, but powerful enough to reach anyone willing to listen. Respect, humanity, grace. Loretta leaned back on her porch swing, watching the stars blink above the trees, and whispered to herself, "Maybe that's all it takes to change the world. One good reminder." Then she smiled, closed her eyes, and let the chimes sing the last song of the night. And for those who watch this story unfold, remember, the next time you think you know who someone is, pause, look closer, listen harder. You might just find out there's someone extraordinary, because kindness costs nothing, but ignorance can cost everything. And that's what makes stories like Loretta's worth remembering. So if this story touched your heart, like, comment bravery, subscribe, and share it. Let someone else feel it too. Because the world doesn't change through anger. It changes through understanding. And it starts right here with you.